that time again. Time for another edition of Tillis Mistakes. And this game is going way back to 2005, and it was a club game. And it's interesting. The older I've gotten, the more I've seen the game of chess speed up. Anytime I go to a club in person anymore, it's, oh, let's play Blitz, let's play Blitz, let's play Blitz. Everybody wants to play Blitz. I can stay home and play Blitz. Um, I grew up week by week playing in coffee shops in Alabama. We played in Dakota Coffee Works for, I want to say, at least 5 or 6 years, and then transitioned to Atlanta Bread Company, which was very nearby after Dakota Coffee Works closed. And my first experience at a chess club was going in, and it was mostly guys in their early 30s to retirement age playing longer games with each other. I never knew anything different. They didn't ever play Blitz. They wanted to play long games. And it was great. Like, I would get more training that way. And I played so many games against Tim Bond that, I mean, you could consider him basically my first chess coach. He would tune me up. The man played the same openings every time he sat down, and I would go home and prepare. I learned preparation skills through that. I would come back, and he would make slight changes every now and then, and we would constantly test each other's openings. And because he was the strongest player in the club, and I quickly became the second strongest player in the club, we inevitably meet and play each week. So, a lot of credit to Tim for taking the time with me when I was young. And I mean, when I started playing in 2003, Tim's rating had dropped a bit. And by 2006, when I graduated high school, both of our ratings were very close to 2000. So having somebody sharp to play against week in and week out, somebody who's hungry, they can motivate you with your own game. So I'd like to think that we helped each other along the way. So without further ado, Tim played his patented first move, and it's one of the reasons that I play Knight F3 pretty frequently today, is from so many games playing against him when I was young. And in this game, I went with C5. And the first point here, and it's just a subtle opening point, that you should not be using this move order with black unless you're a Sicilian player, because white can swap gears here and play E4. Tim, I believe he quit playing E4 in the 80s. So I had no worry about that. And when Tim played E4, he was a close Sicilian player. So we're not getting that from this position. But he plays G3. And after Knight C6, I'm wanting to go E5 because I know that Tim is a Catalan and Grunfeld player. So it is no surprise at all when he plays D4, takes, G6, getting ready to bother him a bit more. And he takes on C6, definitely the more aggressive of the two captures. And Knight D2, Rook B8, making some sense, hitting the B2 pawn. So Knight B3, and it's interesting how my preparation was back then compared to now, like when the infancy of preparation, because I really hadn't been a chess player that long and only had limited resources of, say, chessgames.com. And engines were not very strong in the time period, I mean, comparatively. So here, this move F5 was inspired by a game from the Alabama chess magazine, The Antics. And in 2003, Joe Markram, a guy who didn't play that much, only played like one or two tournaments every few years, and he basically won one of the World Open under sections, and then would win the next one up the next year. And the guy goes to the '03 state championship and wins the tournament, becomes Alabama state champion. He was roughly an expert, and I don't recall him playing much after that. But he annotated all of his games for the Antics, and he beat Tim in a position very, very similar to this with this F5. So I was just simply making a poor imitation in this game. Objectively, playing these positions now, the very first move I checked was choice by the engine, and it is c5. The pawn is, of course, poisoned. If knight takes c5, queen a5 check picks up the knight. And after bishop d2, I go d6. And if he harasses the queen, we've got a good square. And black's able to play bishop b7 as a follow-up. And, you know, this dragon pawn structure that black has is the best pawn structure to meet what white's doing here. So that's what I would recommend today. So after knight b3, f5, bishop d2, I missed something big here, and this was the main reason I chose this for the psychology of competition with this video. Knight f6 and bishop a5 hits like a bolt from the blue. I mean, I felt I was completely safe. I'm just going to castle, then start playing in the center, and then after bishop a5, I was like, wow, do I resign here? Because this is just garbage. And the only move you have is rook b6, giving back the rook. Now, something that some of my early, not coaches, but say early people who inspired my game, those elder adults in the club around me, they always made note of the fact that I like just would not quit. And there's still chances here. Like, I mean, I feel that it's extremely disrespectful to play on when you're like a queen down and your opponent is delivering checkmate in 6 moves. That's disrespectful to me. But in this type of position, it's an exchange. Yes, white is objectively winning, but there's still a lot of life left in this game and room for error for both sides. So we go for it, play e5. And queen d6, a good move. And in order to uncoil, I'm going to have to trade queens. And this is more than likely good for white because when you're up material, you want to trade down to simplify the win. And it's interesting that the engine says queen c7 here is probably even stronger than the move that was played in the game, takes. Because the pawn structure is completely fine. Now, this is a key moment in understanding because my opponent is around 1900 at the time and I'm about 1650, but I don't mind imbalances. I never have. It's something intuitively I've always enjoyed the positions. I'm not much of, say, let's play a London system and get symmetrical pawn structures, and nah. I like when there's dynamics. I seem to have always been able to navigate them pretty well. And if you are white here, it's a good point of what is the most effective way to try to put black away based off the imbalances. All right, that would be a good time to pause the video and try to figure out what plan you would do with white, but I'm gonna keep going. So I look at this position and I go, all right, the major imbalance is the fact that we've got the rook against a minor piece. And rooks are designed to go on open files. So you need to crack open an open file as quickly as possible in order to make the rook as effective as possible against the bishop. Well, the fastest way to do it is going to be with a4 with the idea of a5. Get your rook into the game. If black pushes by, for instance, well, that a pawn is going to be a passer, and that's going to be a handful for black to take care of and maybe impossible. So you're pretty much going to have to take, and it's going to be awkward as white completely dominates the a file and coordinates the rooks. This is a key planning moment. And Tim made a natural looking move in c4 to try to restrict the D and B pawns, but a4 is much, much stronger. And this gives a target. So bishop a6, tickle on the pawn. And now e4, shut down the bishop so I can start looking at the center. And already you can get a slight feel that there's some coordination here for black, and the rooks can't be rooks yet, so just some slight comp. Just some slight comp here. Knight g4, hitting the b2 pawn. Hitting the c pawn. Now, the pieces are organized. Oh, not that. Rook c2, hitting c4. Rook a8, trying to utilize the open file in case the bishop moves. Why is that happening? Okay, sorry about that. Rook a8, b3. Okay, now we're on track. So in this position, I felt the need to do something before I get clamped down with, say, a4. So in the game, I played b5. Much stronger, though, is d5. It's tactically justified because white can't take here due to bishop takes e2 and bishop d3. So that was something I missed. But b5, a reasonable enough move. White definitely needs to go cb, bishop f1 to cover the pawn. And, you know, it's still dynamic and interesting, but the a pawn could become a problem with a4 at some point. This move f4, though, is a knee-jerk reaction which causes further problems for white, and white's position is going to fall apart now. There's no way around it. Resilience. Even when you're worse, if you don't go away, if you continue to attack your opponent, you continue to try to set practical problems, you use the thinking process that was talked about in the solitaire chess, the Fisher game analysis. Intuitively, I've always been a player that asks, what's the most annoying thing I can do? And I say to myself over the board a lot, I may not be the best player, I may not be able to find the best moves, but I will find the most annoying moves. And here, knight g4 is annoying. Knight e3 is a big threat, hitting both the rooks. Knight f1 covers, makes sense. Now, finding the right moment to capture here. And this next move is yet another knee-jerk reaction. And this seems to happen, and it goes along with a story I remember from the Chessmaster series presented by Josh Waitzkin. And it was a story about either he or one of his friends were on the way to a lesson and witnessed this, to where a bike messenger in New York knocks a person into the street. They're just on the sidewalk and they fall into the street, and the person gets up and they're yelling at the guy, the bike messenger, who, you know, clearly is an accident, sorry, he keeps riding, but this person just continues to vehemently scream in the middle of the street where they've been knocked down, and then they get hit by a cab. Thankfully, the person is okay in the story, but he uses it as an analogy in chess that, and in life, that often when we make a mistake, we get so focused on the mistake that we made that we're living in the past. And you cannot focus on the task at hand. In my case, I made a mistake early with rook b6, and I knew there was an uphill battle, and I was ready for it psychologically. I feel like Tim was frustrated that he couldn't put me away from the winning position, and mistakes started happening. This f4, and now h3 is even worse. So we continue to ask the question, you know, what's the most annoying move I can make here? Well, I can actually take. So if he takes the knight, I'm taking the rook, and lights out. So at this point, black should be completely fine, on the verge of winning. Knight f6, Feels good just to make sure I'm not going to be pinned. The rook is in the game. After knight c4, making sure that knight is not going to be too useful, at least. Continuing to eye the e3 square, where threatening takes on c4 and knight e3. So, understandably, move to stop this threat, king f2. Now, knight c3. Tickle, tickle. And rook takes d7. And I can understand Tim's point. He was probably in time trouble at this point, or both of us were. We used to play, I think, game in 30 or game in 60 every time we would play. We would alternate time controls with a 5-second delay. And rook takes d7 is, you know, the need to force something is understandable, but it's just not enough here. Takes. And this position's kind of fun because you want to get the knight without giving anything else. And this is a constant problem I see when analyzing games with my students. They'll get to a position like this, and then they'll get lazy. They'll just grab the knight. And then, in this case, king takes a8, rook d8 check, king b7, rook d7 check, king b6, rook takes g7, and white's winning again. Or in the very, very least has a tremendous amount of play. Looks winning. So, how can we keep our pieces? How can we make sure the bishop on g7 is not going to be captured? What is the most annoying thing we can do? Stop his plan. So, knight d5. Shut the door on the rook to come in. We're still hitting the knight. And now rook a2. So here, how can we get the knight? The knight can't move. We'll need to block the eye of the rook. So the idea should come pretty naturally here. Bishop d4 check. Bishop a7. Knight's not going anywhere. At this point, there's far too much material. The bishop and knight are going to coordinate much better than the rook. Rook doesn't have any targets. Rook can't be a rook. And the g2 bishop's been shut down since I played e4. This just isn't happening. Bishop f1. All right, let's get off that pin. That'll be useful. Tickle on the pawn structure. Check, making sure that bishop isn't going anywhere. Completely dominating the bishop. White has nothing he can do here. And bishop takes e2, which objectively that's probably not even necessary taking there, but it was enough to force resignation by my opponent. Definitely the h-pawn is going to be running up the board and winning the game here. So that's it for that one. And we're back to this concept of the psychology of competition. When you make a mistake, can you recover? I think good chess players can. And when you make the mistake, how are you going to react when it hits you? Are you going to play faster and try to fix it immediately, or get frantic, get anxiety about it, let it bother you? Or are you going to hunker down? Or are you going to make good decisions in order to try to win the game? Remember, there is no such thing as playing for a draw. You psychologically limit yourself if you tell yourself, all I need is a draw. We play the game to win. Always play the game to win, and always have the mindset of what can I do to win this position. You'll have much better results in your games.